Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 6, no hope difficulty, no life cube loss walkthrough, and this is chapter 3 of Chris's campaign. And this is by far the messiest, most unpolished, most unfinished chapter in all of Resident Evil 6. For almost all of the combat encounters in this chapter for this campaign, you are going to see some really bad designs, some really questionable designs, and just wonder how on earth this somehow got past Q&A as being an acceptable excuse for a finished product. You're not going to see the kind of problems I encountered when I was doing this chapter on my recording run, because on my recording run, I was doing so many of the sections on my first try, and this is mainly due to the hell that I went through on my dry run before doing the recording run. On my dry run, I failed so many of the sections in chapter 3 thanks to some very bad designs. Such bad designs included getting quick shot by cheating snipers, getting ambushed after a cutscene because the enemies were moving during the cutscene, getting put into stumble animations through some clunky detection and then getting hit during the animation, getting hit by phantom range and also through geometry from certain projectile attacks, getting screwed by my AI partner because he was drawing too much attention to me, getting caught in cover because of the crappy input for cover and then getting shot because of it, and so much more. This chapter is such a stark contrast to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is just a chapter of waiting for sections to end, while Chapter 3 is just a series of bad designs left and right. I wish I captured footage from my dry run, but I wasn't planning on doing so at the time. You will not believe the kind of crap I was doing just to survive, and while I'm glad that my dry run helped inform my experiences for the recording run, I shouldn't have to build my strategies in response to faults on the developer's part. I'm almost half tempted to do a poor designs of Resident Evil 6 series, much like what I did with Resident Evil 3 Remake, because this game is filled with so many problems that so many people just don't recognize or just choose to laugh off as being minor errors. But these are not minor errors, these are major issues apropos to that of cancer for this game, and they just compromise the overall integrity of the gameplay. You can't just laugh these problems off because all you're doing is just reinforcing the developer's errors, allowing the developers to get away with what they're doing, and allowing these kind of designs to get through. It's just so unacceptable. I am so glad that Resident Evil 7 released after this game, and that it was way more tight and way more polished than this game. I can't remember a single problem with Resident Evil 7 that had anything to do with faults on a developer's part. Not even Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 3 Remake have problems that could be easily comparable to the kind of problems you encounter in this game. However, don't think for a moment that this game is worse than Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake, because I just can't make it as such. Resident Evil 2 Remake is still my least favorite Resident Evil game, with the kind of lackluster designs it favors, and with how much it compromised Resident Evil's unique designs and its evolution. As for Resident Evil 3 Remake, the holes of Resident Evil 2 Remake still bring it down slightly in quality. But going back to this game, at least these issues in Resident Evil 6 are more noticeable in this campaign rather than the other campaigns, given the choice of pace with the encounters and the lack of intelligence displayed with certain designs to each of the sections. Leon's campaign, Jake's campaign, and Ada's campaign are way more polished than this campaign, so they at least salvage this game's positive qualities. It's just hard to find a lot of positives with a lot of the sections in Chris's campaign. And unfortunately, it doesn't end at Chapter 3, because there are sequences in Chapter 4 and in Chapter 5 that do have some pretty bad design choices. But I'm at least able to understand the sections properly and come up with strategies in order to deal with them. That being said, Chapter 5 of Chris's campaign was very difficult to understand at first, and I unfortunately did not get the S rank for Chapter 5 because of one section that was taking forever for me to figure out. And also, I messed up on the recording for one of the sections of Chapter 5, and I had to re-record that section again, but with completely different ammunition. But to accommodate for that error, I made it where I barely used my resources for that new recording. So, pretty much it doesn't feel like that much of a difference in quality, and I don't think it impacts the flow of this walkthrough too much. And the resources that I had by the end of that section were still very helpful for the elevator section, and if I had actually figured out that section faster, I would have actually gotten the S rank. But whatever. That's just how I'm going to have to go with this walkthrough, because you can't restart this game and customize your inventory so that you always have the loot that you had previously. this is not Resident Evil 5's inventory system. This is Resident Evil 6's choice of inventory, and its choice of inventory is so bad because it forces you to play through the game again in order to actually have more resources. And you're forced to do a lot of ammunition farming in chapters that give you a lot of ammunition if you want to actually have the ammo necessary for later sections. And it's just so unnecessary, and especially when you're trying to do co-op with somebody or with like public match players, for instance. If you go into a public match setting or into an online setting and you don't have any ammunition, you just cannot help out your partner because of the way the inventory system is designed and with the way the checkpoint systems are designed. In Resident Evil 5, this was not an issue. Why they decided to get rid of that in this game is something I will never understand. But the only thing I can think of is that because you're able to pick up your own loot and not have to share it with your partner, that's why they made it where you can't just simply go to some separate menu and then customize your inventory. Whereas in Resident Evil 5, you had to share your inventory with your partner, and because of that, they allowed you to have a separate menu that allowed you to customize your inventory. But I think that system should have returned in this game if they've designed the checkpoints as such, and they've also designed the overall gameplay designs for the menus as such. Because it's just so tedious, and it makes doing walkthroughs of this game very hard to do, because if you end up messing up on a recording, or you end up triggering a checkpoint that you don't want, it's impossible to go back, and if you restart a checkpoint, it'll save your loot, and there's no way to repair that. So it impacts the flow of the walkthrough significantly, and that's just the main downside to doing walkthroughs with this game. Resident Evil 5 did not have this issue whatsoever. But enough about that. Let me just talk about what's happening right here. So, this section isn't so bad when you're playing as Chris and Piers. When you're playing as Jake and Sherry, it's a little bit harder, and I definitely consider it to be one of the hardest encounters in the game when you're playing as Jake and Sherry. This encounter, when you're playing as Chris and Piers, is simple because all you need to do right here is stand in this spot, watch where the enemies come from, pay attention to their shadows because their shadows phase through the geometry, and use that to identify where the enemies are coming from, and then aim for their weak spot, because the weak spot for these Grasshopper Juavo is their underside, and they die so fast from the assault rifle. And you can use the shotgun as well. The shotgun also kills them very quickly. You see the shadow? That's how you know where they're coming from, and they can also come from your right. And there's a rare possibility that they can come behind you, but I think that mainly has to do with your AI partner, if your AI partner diverts their attention to that spot. And you can also hear them bouncing around up there, and you can hear them making noises, which is another way of knowing where they're going to come from. But you want to stay in here because the chopper that is attacking Jake and Sherry right now is so broken, and the chopper boss fight later on is honestly the worst boss fight ever made in Resident Evil history, because the chopper not only has the ability to stun you with its spotlight, and the spotlight doesn't even have to be on you in order to stun you, and you get put into this very glitchy stun animation that just prevents you from reloading your weapons or firing your weapons in general. But the explosive rounds that the chopper fires have some of the worst phantom range I have ever seen in any game by far. It has hit me when it's nowhere near me. It has hit me through geometry, and whenever it's prioritizing Piers and Piers is right near me, I get hit all the time. And it doesn't end right there, because the machine gun that this chopper fires can actually fire indefinitely, and it has some ridiculous tracking on you, and it has hit me through walls at times. It's so broken. So my strategy for the chopper boss fight is literally run away from Piers so that he doesn't draw the chopper's attention towards me, use the shoulder swap trick to fire my grenade launcher super fast, because unfortunately you have to hit this boss 22 times with your grenade launcher if you want to kill it. You heard me right, guys. 22 times. How on earth is Capcom expecting anyone to shoot this boss this fast without using the shoulder swap trick? It's almost like they're subtly hinting that you're supposed to use the shoulder swap trick to fire your grenade launcher incredibly fast, because if you're just firing the grenade launcher normally, it takes so long to fire it, and you'll never be able to kill this boss very quickly before you succumb to a stupid design on its part. And then I have to avoid getting in front of the chopper because the explosive rounds are directional. And that is exactly how the fight is going to go. And it sounds simple, doesn't it? But at any moment, this guy can choose to prioritize you over Piers. So you have to stay on the move constantly. And if Piers decides to screw you over, you're fucked. there's nothing you can do. It's so bad. And then you have all the Juavo around, and they can get in your way. It's just a mess. But pick up the grenade launcher immediately, pick up the rounds. When this is 43 meters, climb up. Once you finish this ladder animation, you will get iframes at the very top. And then take the time to use the shoulder swap trick to fire a grenade launcher super fast, because the chopper is always going to circle around this building before coming after you. And the thing is that when you restart the checkpoint, instead of just firing just the explosive rounds, he's going to fire a missile at you. That's another attack I forgot to mention. This boss has the ability to fire a missile at you that is a homing missile, so it will just track you perfectly. So you have to get behind cover to avoid it, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get screwed by a really bad hitbox on that missile. Just based on what I've listed, you can easily tell why I consider this boss to be the worst boss fight ever made in Resident Evil history. This is worse than the Infected Bat from Resident Evil 0, because with the Infected Bat, you weren't even fighting the boss, you were fighting the fundamental mechanic of aiming because of the auto-aim constantly screwing you, thanks to the smaller bats. This is worse than the final boss fight of Resident Evil 0, because that boss fight is all just luck. The mechanics of that boss fight are just so inconsistent, the whole mechanic of distracting it doesn't work very well, and it's just a miserable encounter. And this is way worse than Salazar, because Salazar didn't even do anything from Resident Evil 4. All he did was just one attack, and that was it. And then he had some crappy hitboxes, he had some really crappy QTEs, he had Plaga Type C supporting him, which are a very bad enemy in Resident Evil 4, and he had way too much life, and it just dragged the fight out for such a long time, and it just did not conclude Salazar's arc perfectly. And now we have this encounter right here, and this is way worse than all of those put together. Because not only does this guy have so much life, but at any moment you're going to get screwed by a really bad hitbox, you're going to get screwed by your AI partner, you're going to get screwed by the Juavo, you're going to get hit through the geometry, and it's just a mess. And that isn't even the end of it, because we have to fight another chopper in a second boss fight later on in Chapter 3. Why? Why do we have to go through this shitty boss fight again? I mean, the second boss fight isn't so bad, because at least the environment isn't so complex, and there aren't as many Juavo, and you don't have these Grasshopper Juavo in the second boss fight, you just have that Glava Slews Juavo, which is what I encountered in the beginning of Chapter 3, and that's it. And then getting Piers to actually stay behind is a little bit easier in the second boss fight, because he seems to obey your weight command a little bit more. And this allows you to get a lot of distance from Piers before he decides to come after you and just draw the chopper's attention towards you. But if you choose to shoot the chopper, there is a high possibility that it will instantly switch between yourself and your AI partner. And I just hate the fact that it's so instant. It's so broken and it's so unfair. And I just don't like that boss whatsoever. It's horrible. But I'll talk about it when I get the chance. Right now we're dealing with Iluziha, and Iluziha is a decent fight. I do like that they're trying to take this approach with survival horror, and they're making this a very intimidating encounter. And I think Iluziha is a lot more intimidating than Yawn. Yawn was such a pushover in Resident Evil 1. All Yawn did was just go around in circles, hit you with phantom range on his attacks, and he just had way too much life, and killing him knife only took forever. And it was just such a dragged out scenario, and it was so poorly executed. But this one, I think the execution is a lot better. I mean, originally I was very harsh against Iluziha because I did this boss fight pistol only or like knife only most of the time, just to accommodate for pistol only runs, and that was my main playstyle for Resident Evil 6. But I think that kind of perception is kind of unfair. I do think that Iluziha is a pretty cool encounter, and when you're using the shotgun, Iluziha goes down pretty quickly. But I do kind of feel like Iluziha has a little too much life. I wish the fight ended a little bit faster. That way, it didn't feel like this fight was dragging on so much, and it didn't impact the feeling of this whole entire encounter, which is meant to be very intimidating. But aside from that, it's a pretty simple boss fight. Oh, be careful right there. So, Iluziha has two different attacks. The first attack is it will hide in one of the corners of this room, and you have to shoot its head, and when you shoot it, it will do this very slow wind-up before it actually decides to grab you. But during that time, you can shoot its mouth and stun it with the shotgun, and that will drive Iluziha away. But every time you drive Iluziha away after it does that move, it's always going to do this move, where the game's going to take control of your camera in order to center it on Iluziha, and I'm always going to aim and then run away from Iluziha. That move, it's almost impossible to stop it, because the grab detection on Iluziha's attack is very dishonest because it grabs you a little too early into the animation, which is why you want to move out of the way. But whenever you move out of the way of that attack, Iluzia is always going to attack you, and you'll want to shoot Iluzia once and then move, but always make sure you're standing in front of Iluzia whenever it does that attack, so that you're not going to run the gambit with the side attacks that it does, because the side grabs are a little bit harder to predict as to where you're supposed to dodge. The frontal grab is a lot easier. But just because you stun Iluzia doesn't mean you should just immediately assume it's going to run away. Iluzia will initiate an attack after you stun it. And it's doing this attack right now, so as you can see right here, I'm standing right in front of Iluzia. I'm going to shoot it when its mouth is exposed. Do not do that. Do not dodge after you stun it. Just stay in front of it and then wait for the attack and then dodge. That is exactly how you want to handle Iluzia. But you do have the option of going to optional areas that allow you to get more resources or more healing items. But you have to be very careful when you decide to leave those areas, because Iluzia has the ability to surprise attack you. You might have noticed it when I was first entering a vent at the start of the boss fight, where Iluzia came out of the ceiling and started to come towards me. If you don't stop that move fast enough, you'll take damage, and if you don't shake off Iluzia when it grabs you, you will die. There are 3 different points where Iluzia can attack you if you decide to go for an optional area. The first one is right back in the main room. There is a hallway you can go into that has a crate, and if you decide to backtrack, Iluzia will attack you. The second spot is the vent that I used to get into this area here, but that wasn't really an optional area, this was a mandatory area. And then the third place is that vent right in front of me. That's another area where Iluzia can attack you. And you'll notice that I'm summoning around because of Iluzia. I don't know why they decided to put in such animations like this in this game, and with this fight, I feel that including such an animation takes away from the intimidation factor, and it just leads to Iluzia feeling more like a nuisance than an actual threat. It almost reminds me of Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 Remake. I find it absolutely hilarious how a supposedly deadly BOW just chooses to shove aside zombies like he's a school bully, rather than killing them like Nemesis does in Resident Evil 3 Remake. That plus a lot of other silly designs with Mr. X makes him not so scary. Like, he's more of a nuisance than an actual threat, and he requires a lot of cheap artificial handicaps to cheat, such as with being a very omniscient AI, and just moving so fast whenever he's off camera. Yet he's still lauded by many as being the scariest aspect in the entire Resident Evil series. I still can't believe Watch Mojo Gaming actually said that in one of their videos. I mean, all I gotta say is, I pity these poor fools who fall victim to this illusion. And I have read articles saying that people want a Mr. X design in Resident Evil 8. Like, what an absolute joke. If they decide to put in such a system in Resident Evil 8, it's just going to impact the quality severely. But I'm still doing this fight right now. The first part of this fight is very, very simple, and it works as intended. But the second part of the fight, where you have to actually kill Iluzia using the electricity, because it loses its ability to camouflage, and instead it just hardens its shell. The designs incorporated into that part of the fight just don't feel very right. They feel so poor in their designs, because Iluzia has the ability to move during the initial cutscenes, and if you happen to move before the initial cutscenes begin into a spot where Iluzia can attack you and the cutscene ends, you are always going to get hit. But I at least found a good way to deal with Iluzia whenever the fight first begins. And right now, the fight has ended. The moment Marco goes to the center of this room and Iluzia grabs Marco, it's over. You don't have to save Marco, it'll throw Marco away, and Marco will still be alive. But now begins the second part of the fight. So, the first thing you're going to have to do is put down your controller. Do not move. Wait until Iluzia goes right past, and then let the cutscenes play out like normal. Then, what you're going to have to do is mash the dodge button like crazy and dodge to the right. Then you need to push back on the left analog stick twice in order to move backwards twice. And you can hear Iluzia attacking right now, so I'm going to dodge to the right, move backwards twice, and I will always get past Iluzia. But I make a mistake here. I go the wrong way. I'm supposed to follow Iluzia rather than going in this direction, because if I go in this direction, there's a chance that Iluzia will attack me. If I follow Iluzia instead, I'm not going to run the risk with Iluzia, because Iluzia will prioritize Piers instead of me. And also, this is really stupid right here. This is some old school scripting where, for some reason, you have to hit this switch before you actually deal the killing blow to Iluzia. You have to pull the switch twice. it's dumb. I don't like this old school design with the scripting. There are several moments like that in Resident Evil 6 where they favor such old school scripting. But you'll notice that Iluzia is still attacking me. This is precisely why you need to follow Iluzia after you dodge it for the first time, so that it always prioritizes Piers. And then you'll notice that Iluzia is incredibly fast, so you gotta be very careful of that. And also, I really hate that this camera angle exists whenever you're near the switch. It impacts your movement when you're not even trying to hit the switch. And also, the hitbox on this electricity is really dumb, because it's an instant hitbox. It doesn't have a lingering hitbox, so you can't just hit it and then get Iluzia into the electricity. You have to hit it when Iluzia is actually in the electricity. And it's a good thing that Piers indicates when you're supposed to hit it, but I do feel he's a little early in saying that, so oftentimes it feels like you're gonna miss with Iluzia. But Iluzia is finally dead, and now we have this encounter with the Gnezdo. And this can be a very confusing enemy to understand, but the main thing is whenever it assumes the human form, do not get inside of the swarm, because it will grab you and it will do a lot of damage. You want to always slide into the swarm, or just shoot it if you want to expose the queen. Although dodging around it might still be a better option, just in case. And you'll notice that the Gnezdo did a range attack just then. If you melee that projectile, it will dissipate the swarm. That is really cool design. That's Resident Evil Design 101. But I find this encounter to be very strange, because you remember back in Chapter 2, we dealt with boss-like variants of the Pods, and they had increased health, yet with the Gnezdo, in this very first encounter, it doesn't have increased health. It has the same amount of health as the normal Gnezdo. So, I don't know why this is so inconsistent in its design. I mean, you'd assume that it would have more health, just to give the illusion of being a very threatening enemy, much like what they did with Resident Evil Revelations with that very first ooze that you fought, where it had way more life than necessary. But they didn't do it with this encounter. But now that it's dead, grab Marco's explosives, and I'm really not a big fan of that animation that Chris does where he slams his fist into the ground. I think that's a little overly dramatic. It just feels kind of out of character. And it just kind of makes the scene not feel as serious as I would like it to be. And I do like this part of the game. I do like seeing Chris the way he is. He definitely seems like a dark character, although not as dark as he was in Resident Evil 5, because of course he was dealing with the loss of Jill. And I just think with that aspect of Chris's personality exemplified in this chapter, it makes the boss fight with Chaos in Chapter 5 feel like it has symbolic meaning to it, and I can't really explain what I mean by that, because I don't think you'll understand it the way I do, but maybe I will explain when I get to Chapter 5. But going back to the topic of Chris's personality, the developers promised us that in Resident Evil Village that Chris would be a lot darker than what he was in previous iterations of the Resident Evil series. And I don't see how Chris could be a lot darker than what he's portrayed as in Resident Evil 5 and in this chapter. But I can't wait to see what they do with Chris Redfield. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with the characters in Resident Evil Village. But this section right here is filled with snipers, and this is one of the most annoying parts of the game, and it once again highlights just how broken the snipers are in this section. And I find it funny because these two Grasshopper Juavo, they don't have the ability to fire instantaneously like the other enemies do. They actually take their time to aim before they actually fire at you. Why it's not the case with all the other snipers in this game is just beyond me. It's so stupid. But the best way to handle these snipers is to use the grenade launcher, because you'll notice that the grenade launcher doesn't have a reticle, it has a laser sight, and it makes it very reliable when it comes to accuracy. But I've killed those enemies, and now I need to get rid of this spawn of enemies right here. So aim for the left right over here, and then shoot the door to stun these enemies or kill them. That knocks that guy over, and then there's also a sniper to my right. Piers is looking at him right now, and then there's also a sniper setting up on the same level as I am, so that's why I'm waiting right here, just to keep track of where they are, because these snipers do not have the luxury of waiting. They're just able to fire at you instantly, because that's just not how a sniper rifle works. It's so broken, and it's so poorly programmed, and I have countless clips saved of moments where I get quick shot by these snipers, and I am definitely going to post it to YouTube when I get the chance, because nobody believes me, but trust me, it is a thing in this game, and it's so broken. But there are still snipers lurking about, and watch this! You see that bullshit? You saw the laser for a split second, and then he fired. How is that acceptable? Just explain that to me. What is the justification you can give as to why that should be an acceptable design in a video game? Imagine if he did that at a longer range. Imagine if he did that from across the world. and you had no idea where he was, or had no sort of way of fighting back. That is just so unfair. It's so broken. And I know someone's going to come up with a very dumb argument as to why that should be acceptable, because they just don't know how to play games, they just don't know how to judge games properly, they just don't know what makes games what they are, and they just don't know what functional game design is. And they just choose to defend all these designs that are prevalent in this game, and they just try to laugh it off. What a joke. What an absolute joke. But we now have this fight with Chopper, but we have to do a running sequence right now. And do not move right now. Don't move at all, because this explosion right here, it has a lot of range to it, and if you're moving, it will hit you. But when you reach the checkpoint, if you decide to move, it never hits you. I don't know why it does that, but just don't move upon first starting this running sequence. But now you just gotta keep moving. There's still gonna be a couple of enemies in your way. There's gonna be a moment where 2 Grasshopper Juavo jump in front of you, and it's pretty cheap, because if you're moving too fast, they can sometimes knock you over, and then they'll be able to kick you with that really powerful kick that they do when you're behind them, and then just down you, and then the Chopper will kill you, and then they'll go into a very glitchy animation where the death screen takes forever to play, and you're just staring at water. It's so weird. But just do not sprint on this part, get around these guys, and then start sprinting again. This Nepod is too slow, it will never be a nuisance. And now the fight is going to begin. But I highly recommend you restart the checkpoint so that Piers is all the way back here. Because most of the time, whenever you restart the checkpoint, Piers just gets stuck down there because the Chopper's prioritizing him. But here are a couple of vases that contain grenade rounds. And I'm not going to focus on the Juavo, I'm just going to focus on the Chopper. Right now, the spotlight isn't on me, so I know that the Chopper is prioritizing Piers, but watch this bullcrap right here. Watch this. You see how instant that transition was? The spotlight switched from Piers to myself in an instant, and he was able to fire the machine gun so fast. What a stupid design. But it's prioritizing Piers again, and you can see the explosive rounds right now. He's firing explosive rounds at Piers, and you can see that they're not touching him, and they're just able to hit him so easily, and they have so much range. And this is why I say you need to make sure the AI doesn't screw you, because look at this. He's drawing the Chopper's attention towards me, and increasing the likelihood of me getting screwed by a really poor design choice from this stupid boss fight. But I'm inside this room, and as long as you're back here, he can't hit you, but bear in mind, there are moments where you can get hit through the geometry by these explosive rounds. I have footage of this happening to me in my blooper section, so stay tuned for that. But what I'm waiting for right now that Piers is with me, is for the boss to fire explosive rounds, and then the moment the boss finishes firing his explosive rounds, I'm going to tell Piers to wait, and then I'm going to make a mad dash to the next room, and hopefully the Chopper will prioritize Piers as he's making his way towards me. But right now he's not doing it, but then he's going to switch back to Piers, and now is my chance to shoot it. And this is a really close one right here. I'm going to slow it down. Watch this. Watch how close I get to being screwed by the explosive rounds. You see those explosive rounds coming towards me? That right there was so close. But thankfully, the moment I killed this guy, the projectiles despawned. And we no longer have to deal with that stupid boss fight for the rest of this campaign. And right now we have a couple of small skirmishes, but I'm just going to use the explosive barrel to my advantage. And we're going to transition to the next area. And we're going to intersect with Leon's campaign, because if you remember, from Leon's campaign, there was a sequence where you had to avoid these circular traps that were just sliding on the ground. And we're doing that section again, but we're playing as Chris now. And just like in Leon's campaign, this section has some really bad design choices, because the cutscenes that play in this upcoming encounter are completely unnecessary, and they serve no purpose other than to let the circular traps down you, because you cannot move, you cannot dodge, and you cannot do anything during those cutscenes, and the moment you come out of them, you're screwed. It's so broken. Once again, how do you let this kind of design slide past Q&A? And I know that these kind of issues, they come across Q&A all the time, but the developers can't do anything about it because it might cause other problems. But when it's this bad, and when you're putting in a design choice like a cutscene, and it's causing this kind of issue, why do you bother including the cutscene at all? You can fix a lot of this game by not including all those cutscenes where the enemies are able to move. You only have the cutscenes that are letterboxed, because when the cutscenes are letterboxed, the enemies cannot move during the cutscene. But look at this cutscene right here. What is the whole point of this cutscene? Why is it trying to show me something so redundant? I know that Piers has done the first hack. Can you actually trust the player when it comes to identifying this? I mean, it's just common sense. You can even see the dialogue playing right now. I know he's done the first hack. It's so stupid. Like, I don't know why they decided to put in these cutscenes. There are some really questionable design choices with those cutscenes. There's some really questionable placements, and all it does is just compromise the overall integrity of the game. But the same strategy as before in Leon's campaign, I'm just going to run over these circular traps because they take very long to detonate, and this will help keep them off of piers, but it's not the only method you want to rely upon, because while you're dealing with these traps, there could be other traps that are sneaking towards piers, so it's best to shoot them to get them out of the way. But this is the end of the section right here, and now I'm just going to skip to this car chase sequence. But because the AI is in control of the car in the beginning, and they're very good at driving because they actually programmed the AI very well for these driving sequences, and you're in no danger whatsoever until you get over here, I've decided to skip directly to this part. So destroy the trucks in this order as follows, and make sure your reticle is placed exactly where it is so that you'll be able to hit the car behind it after you destroy this car here. And then, once we do this sequence here, we're going to switch places with Piers, and I'm going to start driving. And, by the way, for that sequence, it's random how much health you're going to get in the end. There are times when you will go into the red state after that sequence, because the damage is so inconsistent. And you can still get the sequence done in the red state, but you just got to make sure that you use the nitro booster at the correct moment, when there's just a lot of space, so that you don't accidentally hit a wall, because it does do a lot of damage. And then, watch out for these rocket launcher guys. I don't really understand the rocket launcher guys on this part, because for some reason there are times where the rocket will actually detonate early and it doesn't even make contact with you. I don't know if that's because the Piers actually shooting the rocket, or it just so happens that the rocket clipped on something else. I don't know, but just do your best to avoid them. But fun fact about this sequence, if you press circle, you'll be able to toggle the headlights, and if you hold down the L3 button, you can honk the horn. So there are some small details in Capcom's part. You gotta always appreciate it when Capcom puts in such small details in their games. But if you're wanting to start this sequence with full health, you can just kill yourself. You can get one death in this chapter and still get the S rank, so that definitely helps out. I think they understood that, and that's why they made it as such. I mean, I still kind of wish you could just restart the checkpoint and just get all your health back that way, because I think this sequence just works better as a spectacle moment rather than a moment that involves player agency. And I think it's a very interesting change of pace. There are a lot of sequences in this game where they try to change up the gameplay style. Like, there's a sequence in Chapter 4 of Chris's campaign where you get to pilot a plane. And I don't know why a lot of people say that the controls for the plane are really bad, because I never struggle with the controls at all. It works fine. It works pretty well. And the only thing that really sucks about the plane sequence is the dodge system, because there are times where you successfully dodge the missile, and then it just loops back around and hits you. But the good news is that it doesn't instantly kill you. It just deals a little bit of damage, and I don't know how many missiles you can take before you actually die, but it's a lot. So that sequence is not as bad as so many people say it is. But this is the end of Chapter 3, and before I conclude the commentary, here are a couple of bloopers that showcase the bullcrap that is the helicopter boss fight. And the number of video clips I save for this doesn't properly represent the amount of times I got screwed by this boss. But right here, on this piece of footage, I get hit through the geometry by the explosive rounds. That is absolutely bullcrap. And then this right here, the machine gun just instantly turns towards me, and I get hit, and then I get hit through the geometry again, and then this is really stupid. So this boss has the ability to fire multiple volleys of explosive rounds. Normally he's supposed to fire one volley, but for some reason on this recording, he fires 3 volleys. Can I just say that that is just really bad? I'm sure a lot of people can agree that this is a really bad design choice, and then couple that with the phantom range on those explosive rounds, and you have just got yourself a really douchey move. And I wish I could say that the problems end right there, but there are still more problems to come in Chapters 4 and 5, and I will definitely go into a lot of details about them, and I will also showcase them in my poor designs of Resident Evil 6 video series. But stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.